Welcome to another episode of the Social Media Church podcast. My name is Matt Williams. I'm your host. And we believe that the church isn't confined to just four walls in a building. We believe the church is the people of God. And one of our goals with this podcast is to help the church use social and digital media strategies to advance their mission, to advance their message, so that they can join God in his work to advance his kingdom and help as many people as possible find and follow and flourish as they get to know Jesus and all the impact that he can make on their lives. And I'm super excited because today we have Marc and Amy Cameron from How We Love, and we're going to talk about a lot of things. We're going to talk about how we love. We're going to talk about what Marc's new book that's coming out, some attachment styles, and how digital media is supporting their ministry efforts. So Marc and Amy, it's so good to see you, and thank you for being here.
Thanks for having us. We're excited to be on.
Awesome. So I'd love to hear from both of you, but I want to start with you guys, who you are, what you're doing. I just mentioned that you work for How We Love. Marc, you just wrote a book. I know you guys are both working all day, every day, and you also have families. So maybe let's start with Amy. Let's start with you, just kind of your background and what you're doing. And then Marc, share a little bit of your story and how it all intertwines. We just want our audience to get to know you guys a little bit.
So yes, Marc and I just celebrated our 13-year wedding anniversary yesterday. So we're actually going to have dinner tonight to celebrate, but we're excited about that.
Awesome.
And I'm a nurse practitioner. And now because of How We Love, I went from a learner of the How We Love material to a leader in ministry. So a lot of change in the last year, but we just feel truly honored to take over what the hard work that Milan and Kay Yurkovich have done with How We Love, because we do believe that attachment core pattern therapy has helped our relationship and has helped just a lot of our relationships. So we just feel honored to step into that role. But it's big shoes to fill. So we're just walking step by step.
That's awesome. Marc, what's your background? How did you get to How We Love? What are you up to now?
Yeah, so I am a marriage and family therapist. But Amy wasn't a psychiatric nurse practitioner when we met, and I was not a marriage and family therapist. So we met in 2012. We met in August, so we got married in November. So we had
do the math.
We had a super quick introduction and courtship and marriage. But of course, you don't know someone in 3 months, and we were really in the idealization phase.
Yeah, in that ideal state, like we never had an argument before we got married. Good thing.
Exactly. But then when we got married, of course, real life sets in, and relationships shift to a more of an individuation stage where each person kind of struggles a little bit and pushes back on one another. And then that's where we had conflict, and we didn't really know one another fully deeply back then, but we are a blended family, so we're both married before both our marriages ended in divorce after our former spouses committed infidelity, and so we had that in common, and we each had a 7-year-old in tow when we got married, so we blended very, very quickly.
Carter really wanted and needed a mom. Caitlin really wanted and needed a dad. So it was like there was pieces there that we saw, like objectively, we're like, oh yeah, this all makes sense. Like we're Christian, we have our careers, we have kids that need, good parenting. So we just idealized that. But then when we stepped into that relationship, and then the core pattern started, and we were not equipped with how to resolve conflict. And that first year was really hard.
Yeah. So we struggled probably for about 5 or 6 years. We were committed to marriage and not getting divorced.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a struggle because we're getting to know one another, and we had to adjust. And then I read a book called How We Love in my men's group, and I was totally blown away. This book described me. It was on attachment styles, and attachments are how we've learned to bond. We all have a relationship style or a bonding style, and we learn that from the families that we grew up in. And I read this book, and I read one of the attachment styles, and I was like, oh my gosh, how is this describing me in words that I didn't have for myself? But immediately when I read them, I knew they were true. And then when it talked about the background that shapes this attachment style, it was scarily accurate. And then also the way that we learn to have or we were having conflict, because that's what Mylan and Kay's book, How We Love, really centers on. It talks about attachment, but it talks about what happens when two different attachment styles come together. It creates a core pattern, and that creates a predictable cycle of how conflict plays out. And at that time, I was going back to get my hours to be a therapist. I'd gone through school when I was first married. But then when my wife left, I fell back on my business degree, and I wasn't able to get all of my hours done. And after we got married, we created more financial stability. And so as I was just about to go back and get my hours, I read this book, and I looked Mylan and Kay up, and they were here in Southern California. And then I said, I just took a shot in the dark. I emailed Mylan and said, I want to come work for you. And then it worked out. It worked out that the story I tell in my book, and Mylan writes the intro, and he tells a little bit about the story in the book too. But I went to work for them, and that was it.
Yeah, looking back, like the timing of everything, like you just have to see like God's stamp on it. Like, I did love that about Mark in the beginning, that he wanted to be a therapist, and like the fact that he, got to go back and do that after having the real life experience of being a single dad, blended family, going through a divorce. All of these are real life experiences, some good, some bad, that he brings into like the clinical setting for people with real life, not just that polished degree and no experience, So and when How We Love came into his small group study with his men's group, he just loved it, and like he just applied that attachment theory, and that's what he specializes in therapy. And it really is a nice way to unify a couple in therapy, because it takes all the pressure off of like, what is the fight now, but like, where's the reactivity coming from? And that it's from childhood in the past, and it really opens up a vessel of empathy that I think other therapy modalities do not.
Yeah, I love that. And I know Mark and I chatted a couple weeks ago kind of preparing for this, and I was sharing with Mark that I have a very, very minimal understanding of attachment theory and attachment styles, but the little bit I've understood, I'm fascinated by, because I know I think if anybody's honest, then they'd probably agree with this, but there's sometimes where I respond, or I should say react is the more appropriate word. And I'm like, why? Like, I don't know where that came from. I wasn't in a bad mood, but like 2 minutes ago, but now all of a sudden I'm like grumpy and irritable and all these things. And so I told Mark, we obviously, the goal is that this book reaches a ton of people, but he has at least one person that's going to buy a copy, because I will be a buyer right away, and I want to read it. And I think that's a good segue, because can you guys share just what is attachment theory? What are like the attachment styles? Kind of give us an overview, pretend like we don't know anything about it. Has it been around for a long time? What are some of the core tenets? Just teach our audience what this is, and that'll help us learn more about How We Love and what you're doing with the book and everything like that.
Yeah, so there's been 80 years of research on attachment, but it's only really been recently, maybe the last 10 years, that it's really kind of come to the fore and people are learning about it. And the reason being because researchers tend to write to researchers in medical journal, kind of up here where most people generally don't read. And then Mylan and Kay, they were one of the first people who really kind of put it into a book for the layperson to understand. They say that they just took the cookies from the top shelf and put them on the bottom shelf so that everybody can access. But what attachment is as I mentioned, it's that bonding style. So researchers for the last 80 years have been observing the bond, the connection between a mother and a baby, and how well a mother will pick up on that baby's needs and meet those needs. And that's called attunement. Attunement really is the measure of attachment. It's not whether a parent is responsive, it's whether they're attuned. They know exactly what the baby needs. Because if a baby's crying, but it needs a dirty diaper change, and you give the baby a bottle, well, that's being responsive, but it's not being attuned. So this is not about blaming parents here or mudslinging. It's really just about how we've learned to connect and how that forms early on. And so that bond that forms, whether that parent is able to understand what the baby needs and meet those needs, really builds a trust, and it builds a security between the baby knowing, well, my mom is going to meet my needs or not. And then it starts between mother and infant, but of course fathers are involved too. And our attachment style just develops across the whole the whole stages of growing up. And so most of us are in our family homes for 20 years. So that's a lot of conditioning. So attachment is basically relational programming on what to expect from other people, and then what we do, which are called reactions when our needs don't get met, or what we have to do to try and get our needs met.
That's really helpful. So what if my limited knowledge is correct, there's 4 attachment styles. Is that right? Could you walk us through like what these attachment styles are and what they look like?
Yeah, so in my book and in my own case book, we outline 6 attachment styles.
6, okay.
But they come from 5 different categories. So first of all, there's secure attachment. So secure attachment is when a parent can accurately reflect back to a child what a child is feeling, and what their needs are, and supply those needs in a responsive way. They can give a child language to what's happening on the inside. They can provide empathy. They can provide validation. They just provide safety. And when that happens, a child grows up, goes into adulthood, believing that relationships can be secure, that I can get my needs met, and that I have language for what's going on the inside. And I can express that, and I can ask and request for my needs, and expect that they're going to be met. We do 2 things with our emotions. We talk them out, we act them out. So if we don't have words and language for them, we'll act them out. I like to say we verbalize, okay, or we dramatize, we'll sulk, we'll pout. But then people got to guess what's going on the inside for us. But if I can tell you, Matt, hey, I feel unheard, and then what I need to resolve that, I need to be heard, I'm more likely going to get my needs met. And so securely attached people go into adulthood with this language, and they find other people who are like them, similar to them, and they end up in a secure relationship. Here's the math, it takes 2 securely attached people to form a secure attachment. You can't take 2 insecure attachments, put them together, and expect that that's going to be relationally secure. It's not. Yeah. It's going to bend, and sometimes it's going to break.
So a lot of times we ask in our workshop, do you have a memory of being comforted as a child? And it's sad because it's like less than 20% raise their hand.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And, if you think about that, like we're called to comfort one another in marriage, and where a lot of times marriages fail is people go for comfort in other ways. And that's where addiction starts. That's where affairs start. So we're really trying to bring the safety and the trust and the comfort into a relationship, and giving them tools to do that, to earn a secure connector. Because most of us, you can go and take the quiz, and some people are like, oh my gosh, I scored high in all of these things. Like they got like 5 diagnoses. Like, do not panic, because you can earn a secure attachment. Like a lot of us were inherited the abnormal rhythms or the abnormal imprints, but we can work to earn secure connector in our relationships.
So attachment, you're not just stuck with what you got. It's something that you can cultivate and develop.
Well, that's what the research shows. So I'll explain the rest of the attachment styles, and then I'll talk about the good news about attachment. And so
get to the good news, right?
So our Amy's saying, Scripture says comfort one another with the comfort that you have received. And so if we haven't received comfort, then how do we know how to comfort one another in marriage if we didn't receive that as a child? And so I'll explain the insecure attachment styles here, which is the avoider, which comes from dismissive avoidant attachment is the actual research word, but we use the word avoider. So the avoider comes from a home where it's very performance based. The focus is really on academics or athletics or chores, just task mastery, getting things done. There's not a whole lot of conversations about deep emotional states. Sometimes I'll hear people who say, I don't remember being told I was, I love you from a parent growing up. I knew they loved me, but I don't remember those tender words happening. Or my parent wasn't didn't provide a whole lot of physical touch. I didn't get a lot of hugs, but they showed up at every game. Right. So I believe I was loved, but I didn't get these other things. And so what happens is this kid learns to turn the volume down on their emotions, because the message is you're over feeling. Sometimes, it's not that these parents are generally harsh, but we want to try and relieve, but we try and relieve stress in the way that we know. And so if a kid is worried and a parent says, oh, don't worry about it, it's going to turn out fine, or I'm scared, you know what, be brave. So oftentimes that happens. And so it's unintentional, but you can't connect with an emotion that you're at the same time trying to change. And so that is actually dismissive. And so this kid learns to turn the volume down on their emotions because that's the message that they're receiving, and they become very task mastery. And so they become performers, and usually we love that in the Western world because we love people who are proficient and who are efficient and just get the job done and get on with it and don't get stuck. But so they're attractive to others because they're consistent. But when it comes to connection in a relationship, they can't form that connection with others because the definition of empathy is I know what it feels like for you because I know what it feels like for me. But if I don't go there with my emotions, I'm not going to be able to go there with your emotions. And I'm not going to be able to understand your emotional state because I suppress and dismiss mine. And so when it comes to connection, there's a barrier there for them. And then when it comes to conflict, they just think, well, you'll get over it. And so they either try and problem solve. And if that doesn't work, then they avoid and spend time at work or at the gym. And they think, well, I'll get over it. You'll get over it. And so usually there's no resolution.
And so as a child, like they were taught emotions are messy and unwelcomed. So they were literally capped off. So like, how are you doing? I'm fine. So like when the other spouse wants to kind of know about some of these emotions, like they're not even under there. They have to really be developed for the avoider. So it does take some work. Yeah.
So common complaints from spouses of avoiders is it feels like my spouse doesn't really need me.
Okay.
Yeah. Or they don't get to know me. So that's avoidant attachment. Then there's anxious attachment. Many people have heard of avoidant and anxious attachment, but there's actually two different types of anxious attachment. So the first one we refer to as the pleaser. So pleaser kids grow up in homes where they learn to manage the parent's emotions rather than the parent managing their emotions. So they typically have a parent who is angry and that anger scares them, or they have a parent who's highly critical, or maybe an anxiously worried helicopter parent who just kind of protects them from everything, doesn't allow them to do a lot of exploration. Or they might even have a parent who's chronically depressed. And so what they do is they become the good kid. The avoider becomes the performer. The pleaser becomes the good kid. Sometimes pleasers are performers too, because the role of the good student is to sit at the front of the class and answer all the questions and get your homework done. But they're more the good kid. They don't want to stress their parent. So they don't want to be an additional stressor, and so they regulate the parent by being good. They can try and predict parents' needs so that they're not stressed, and so they grow up going into adulthood checking emotional temperatures. This is the type of person that will just come up to you and say, "Hey, are you okay? Is everything all right?" You look down. Are you sure? Sure, nothing's wrong. And they're Mr. Nice Guy, Mr. Nice Girl. So if you ask them where you want to go eat, they'll say, I don't know, where do you want to go eat? And they think, well, I don't really care and I want to be happy. But that's not true, because oftentimes they don't know what they want, because in order to know our likes and preferences, we've got to explore them. But if we gave in all the time, we don't really know. And it's not that they want others to be happy. It's what they don't want others to be upset, because when others get sad or angry, they feel this anxiety inside. So they please and appease to calm other people down. It's really disingenuous because they calm other people down really to calm themselves down. So then
that's interesting.
But when it comes to,
sorry to cut you off, but that's fascinating.
Yeah, like don't be sad. Everything happens for a reason. Like they kind of want to keep you up there. Like going down there, like it's uncomfortable.
So avoiders are problems fixers, pleasers are mood fixers. They want so when it comes to conflict, they typically freeze or fawn. They give in. They please and appease, and so they lose themselves in relationships. And a healthy relationship is balanced. And pleasers, they're not really good at saying no because they don't want to disappoint others, so they become overcommitted. And they can become codependent. So that's one anxious attachment style. The other anxious attachment style is an anxious resistant attachment style, which is the one that Amy and I developed.
Push-pull.
And we call that style the vacillator style, because they vacillate between what they want. And so this kid grows up in a home where they get some connection and attention that they enjoy, but then they're made to wait on it. And so that could be because it's based on the parent's mood, or it's based on the parent's availability. So that could be physical availability with, a parent who is not as involved or lives out of town, or maybe it's a custody deal where you bounce back and forth between custody of parents, always with a parent, but never with the same parent. And sometimes it's the parents travel for work. Or shift work that they work. It's irregular schedules. Especially, I know there's a lot of pastors who listen to this, and so the schedule could be irregular in the evening or on the weekends when parishioners really need you. And so they're made to wait. So they get connection, but they're made to wait. And the waiting, they feel unseen, unknown, and misunderstood. And so when the parent comes back, they protest, they act out their feelings, they push, pull, hoping they sulk, they pout, they outburst, wanting the other person to see that I'm hurt and to fix it. But a lot of times the parents don't pick up on that. They can't fix it, or they can't change their job situation. And so this kid grows up, goes into adulthood with their longing for connection turned on high.
Yeah. Have you ever seen those babies, toddlers being picked up from the nursery and they're like mad at their parents, but like they want them, but they want them to know that they're mad?
Yeah.
When you bring that dynamic into a relationship, especially a romantic relationship, like, I want you to know that I'm mad, but I want you to apologize, but I don't want to hold your hand. Like, that is the pattern that we have to overwork with that attachment imprint.
So these kids grow up, go into adulthood with their longing for connection turned on high, and they are all in when they meet someone, especially romantically, because romantic relationships at the beginning, it's all about time, attention, connection, which is all of the things that they're longing for. But that's an idealization stage that almost all romantic relationships go through before it shifts, as we were explaining. So that's why we got married so quickly, because we were all in. I found my perfect partner, my soulmate. The chemistry, the connection was there. These are words that they often use. But
we didn't believe in soulmates. But that idealism of like, check. Okay, all the boxes are checked. This is going to be ideal. And idealism is a very far fall from reality. So there's idealism, reality, and deep disappointment. And you got to find reality in this one.
So they really fall in love with an idealized person in their mind. And that becomes their expectation. And then when relationship shifts, problems occur, they do what they did in childhood. They sulk, they pout, they push, pull, wanting the other person to see that they're hurt. The problem is the protest is unkind or hurtful. So the other person doesn't want to come after them, or they're ambivalent. And ambivalence means, that's actually the research word, they're preoccupied or ambivalent. Ambivalence is two opposing feelings. So they are hurt that you have not seen their needs, but when you come and try and apologize, they want a distance or want space, or they want to tell you, well, you shouldn't have done it in the first place. And so they get conflicted in their emotions, and that causes a barrier. And then the last one here is disorganized attachment style, and that really comes from kids who grow up in homes where they're dangerous. And so, we're talking about, high levels of addiction here, abuse, neglect, physical abuse, verbal abuse, emotional abuse. And so, human beings, we don't just run, all animals run from danger, but human beings don't just run from danger. Primates, so monkeys, apes, humans, we also run to a protective figure. But what happens when your protective figure, your attachment figure, is also the source of danger? Well, you get stuck because your attachment system says run toward and your safety system says run away. And so that's why it's called disorganized attachment. And so these kids, generally, they leave home very early. Their needs are really reduced to survival. And so it's not uncommon to hear somebody who left home even at like 14, 15, 16, couch surfing, becoming independent very, very early. And so they can develop a mix of the attachment styles because they try everything and it doesn't work, or they get bounced around between different foster homes or different family members. And so they have different caregivers, people who become primary caregivers who they learn to bond with because they're all different. Or what Mylan and Kay observed, and I discussed too in my book, is they can go one of two ways where they realize that, especially if abuse is prolonged and pervasive, they can become the controller, because they learn that relationships are this one up, one down. And I'm not going to be in the controller person says, I'm not going to be in the one down position, and they learn to fight back. And so they go into the one up position, and they control their environment for predictability, for safety, but they control their environment by controlling others. Or they go into this one down position where the victim says, well, abuse is going to occur, I can't escape, but if I can stay under the radar as much as possible, it will reduce the frequency of abuse. And so they really learn something called learned helplessness, where they believe that they don't have agency to save themselves. So when they grow up and they go into adulthood, they stay in that role. And these two often find one another in adulthood. And that's where you will see the cycle of abuse. And the frustrating part, you try and help people out and they don't get out of it, even when they're offered away, because that's just the template for relationships. And the church often doesn't really know how to help people who get stuck in this dynamic.
And our heart really goes out to those people because, oftentimes they're just so desperate to be able to bond with somebody. They didn't have a safe person to bond with as a child. So that's why they can enter the foster care system. And then, they're hoping, their next boyfriend's going to fix their problem. And then usually they find somebody with more problems and it just compounds and compounds. I was even just talking to a lady the other day about gang members. Like they look up to another figure, and so they could take on the victim role and then turn into the controller role. You can kind of see how this can compound. So we want to help people that have gone through hard stuff and equip them to make changes in their life, because when you're in a cycle like this, it's hard.
But they're not gender specific, these roles. So a female, I know sometimes we might think of a male being in a void, especially in our society, because culturally males are conditioned to be detached from their emotions. They're made fun of, they're called a sissy for crying or whatever else. But these are not gender specific. Females can be avoidant, males can be a vacillator, like myself. Females can be controllers, males can be victims. And I've met males who are very highly well educated in society. But when they go home, they go into this victim role and they put up with abuse. They endure abuse.
So we mentioned there's some good news. First of all, thank you for that overview and that primer on the attachment styles. And you mentioned the good news. And so I have a 2-layered question here. You mentioned that you can evolve your attachment theories, you can grow. And I'm curious if you could paint a picture. Don't share anything you're not comfortable with, but it'd be awesome to hear a picture of before you guys really leaned into how we love and what an interaction would look like, and then the transformation of after. And obviously nobody's perfect, no marriage is perfect, but you feel much more equipped to navigate that conflict. So help us understand how things can learn and grow and we can change for the better. And then also an example maybe of what that's looked like for you two as you've navigated this journey and are now teaching other people how to navigate and get to a place where you're in a healthy relationship like you guys are.
So my first step one in doing this work was understanding and owning my reactivity, as you talked about. So I was an ICU nurse for 13 years, and I was able to go into an emergency situation and respond because I was trained to do so. Coming home and, this trigger, and then the explosion, was my pattern at home. And so, Mark did start to change first. He was applying the material with clients and everything. And he, he stopped getting as angry, or his pattern started to change. So that was the stimulus for me to change. But I really did have to understand that my nervous system needed to be calmed, because for our old imprint, I'm feeling misunderstood, unseen, unheard. Everything just gets shook up in me, and then I just want to just kitchen sink him or shake the whole rug out, just spew it all out. Because that's initially how vacillators feel better. I got it all out. I spoke the truth. But really what I needed to do is take, all that preoccupation, all that rumination, every time I've ever been misunderstood that spews out, and boil that down to about 2 sentences and invite an actual conversation. So we went from exploding all over each other to being able to communicate with one another. And that got our ability to resolve conflict much sooner, because I admit I would sulk sometimes for a day, sometimes for 2 days, sometimes all weekend. And just we wouldn't talk, we wouldn't get anywhere, because that was my default. That's what my mom did. She would shut down, sulk, he should come apologize, and here I'm waiting for, so that was the default, and this was the upgrade.
So the good news of attachment research is that we don't have to remain this way. Our brains are neuroplastic, meaning we can constantly learn throughout our lives. And so attachment is it's the number one predictor of how your relationships are going to go, because it's your expectations, it's your reactivity, as Amy says. And so, but we can change. So attachment research actually shows that we can earn a secure attachment style. That's actually the research word. So earn, it's work. But in order to do that, the other research terms are, we got to build a coherent narrative. And so coherent is something that makes sense. A narrative is a story. So really, by making sense of my childhood story, by understanding attachment styles, what attachment styles are, by understanding where we fall in that attachment, by how our parents impacted our expectations, well, now that gives us the awareness to know where we are failing, right? I mean, I like to mirror this because I do think that attachment is mirrored to sanctification, because, Jesus is not good news unless you know you're a sinner. Once you know you're a sinner and there's no hope, right? Or you realize that Jesus is the hope, then Jesus becomes the best news, the ultimate news. So you have to first recognize that. But there's also people who recognize that they are sinners and they reject Jesus. And we all know that diet and physical health lead to, or diet and exercise lead to physical health, but how many of us actually follow through and do it? So then you've got to work these specific growth goals, because there's only one secure attachment style. And Jesus is the ultimate securely attached model for us. He knew how to say no, but he also was in touch with his emotions. He could cry. He cried with Mary and Martha, even right before he was about to raise Lazarus. He could push back against the Pharisees. And so he's the ultimate model. And so we can earn our way there. And it's not that we're earning love, but we've got to work our way there. Our attachment styles, really, it's programming, it's adaptations. We don't get to choose our parents. We don't get to choose our environments. And so it's adaptive, the way that we learn how to behave in childhood. But when we get into adulthood, we have more power, we have more responsibility in relationships, so we have more agency, and what we learned is non-adaptive any longer. And so we need to learn how to be secure. And so each of the attachment styles has specific growth goals. We're all trying to get to the same place, but pleasers, they don't have a no. They're not good at conflict. They run away. So they need to learn, how do I lean into that into a productive way? And vacillator, they're very good at conflict, in the sense of they're not afraid of it, but they need to learn, how do I pull back? How do I learn to sit in a listener role? And so the path is different, even though we're all trying to get to the same place. Now, sanctification is a process. It's not an event, right? Yes, the Bible says we'll become a new creation, but Jesus also says, if you love me, you obey my commands. And so we know that becoming is a verb. We become more like him by behaving more like him, by being more in him. And I believe that attachment is God's design of how we bond. And it goes always. It goes, toward our parents. It starts that way, from parent to child, and it goes towards our spouse, and it goes from us to our kids. But it also is our attachment and our expectations of God. And so I believe it's part of the sanctification process. And so as you can't be spiritually mature without being emotionally secure. Those two things go together. And so as we learn how to show up better and more securely in relationships, we become more like Jesus, more like the model.
And if you
I'm literally writing down, you can't be, sorry, Amy, go ahead.
Just trying to get a word in here. So, pleasers freeze, avoiders flee, and vacillators fight. And so these are all the reactive patterns. So if you can recognize patterns in your relationships, you can learn how to remedy them. So for us, we had very reactive, fights. But for maybe a pleaser and avoider, like maybe they haven't fought in 20 years, but how deep has that conversation got? So the goal is to deepen connection here. And for things to be understood, and to bring the hard parts of the day home, and to be able to comfort one another. The things that, bother you, that maybe aren't that big of a deal, that you just shove down, but the goal is to be fully known in this relationship. And that's what we're trying to help people do. So
So there's two ways that we grow. One, because I can't earn Amy's secure attachment, she can't earn mine. So each of us have to take responsibility for our attachment style and work those growth goals. You got to practice whatever you want to become. That's how it works in life. And so we put on secure attachment for as long as we can, for moments, right? And that's how the brain forms new neural pathways. But Mylan and Kay in their book, they talk about core patterns, and then they talk about how do you resolve that core pattern. And you resolve that with something called the comfort circle. Most couples, they argue back and forth usually about the facts of something very minor that sets them off. You know, the dinner was cold, or you showed up late, or I don't like your tone of voice, and it all becomes about that. And then they want to stack all of these other issues on the table. And so what the comfort circle does is it just splits that time, and probably less time when you factor in all the sulking and disconnection that comes with conflict. And says, okay, instead of going back and forth with the perceived facts, like, one of us will be the listener and the other one will be the speaker. And I will try and understand. I'm not trying to agree with you, because that's what we're trying to do often in conflict. I will try and understand. And so I'll lean in, I'll ask good questions, I'll be the listener, I will empathize, I will validate your feelings. This is not validating behavior, it's validating feelings, given your experience, given your perspective, given your history of why you might see it that way. And when we do that, people calm down, because you don't have to say hurtful things to grab the other person's attention. And so you settle down, and if I can do that for you, you're more likely to do it for me. And so then we're more likely to get to resolution. And if we can understand by building this coherent narrative, we can go back into our childhoods and understand how we were shaped, how we learned to get our needs met. We can see that in conflict, what's really happening is a rekindling of an old neural network. It's in the subconscious, so it's kind of over here in our blind spot. But as we develop that narrative, we move it into the foreground, so we can see really what is animating us, and it is a rekindling of a neural network. And then that depersonalizes what's happening to us in the present, and it depersonalizes it for us to the other person, and for the other person to us too. And that's where we really deal with the core issue of what's happening. And if we can provide empathy and validation, we're providing a reparative experience. You need a reparative experience to soothe and to change that memory. We change memories, because when we remember, it's not like the movies where it's like this complete video clip of what actually happened. When we remember the last time we remembered. So if we remember something, so it's like putting a photocopy in a copy machine, and then putting that photocopy in the copy machine again, and then putting that right again. It becomes fuzzy and blurry. It's not clean and crisp. But when we remember the last time, and we now have comfort, and we have forgiveness, or we have grace, or there's no shame in that, then the next time we remember that, we've changed the neural pathway. And so that's how comfort and connection actually brings us closer together. And it ends up reducing our triggers and reducing our reactivity, and we heal. This is the Lord's design. Who created attachment?
Yeah.
God created attachment. Human beings have the longest attachment phase of any animal on this planet. Do you think that was purposeful? Do you think that's significant? It absolutely is. God created attachment for the way that we bond with others and that we bond with Him. But there's also when it goes wrong, there's a healing process in place. Just, isn't that just like the Lord to build in a redemptive process?
Yeah, the Bible says, confess your sins to one another that you may be healed. And it's like, a lot of times we confess it like when we're raising our hands at church, and like we're just kind of giving it to God type thing. But like confession actually coming in this relationship, like, like, I'm sorry that I did that, like, can I have a do-over? Inviting a reparative experience, or, hey, I don't feel like you really heard me. Like, this is really important to me. Can you hear me out on this? Inviting those experiences in here with confession is going to increase intimacy.
Yeah, it's not, in the church, we just kind of label things as sin. But the divorce rate in the church is the same as it is outside of the church. It's not enough just to label it as sin. And it's also not enough just to say you just love one another. Because if you don't know what love really looks like, you can't then practice that. So we need to understand what it really does look like, and go through the reconditioning process.
Yeah.
That's
one more thing to add.
Yeah.
We both experienced divorce, and like our hearts go out, because it's worse than death. Like, we've seen what it does to our children, And it's hard, it's painful. And so we want divorce rates to go down in the church, but we want intimacy in marriages to also increase, because who is seeing this relationship in our home? Our kids are. And marriage rates are down. Like, kids are scared to get married because they don't want to end up like, they don't want to end up. So we want to equip people with good relationships, and we feel like this is an opportunity for the church to grow and secure attachment, in community and together. And if there's a lot of ways this will help people in marriages and other relationships.
That's such a perfect segue, Amy, because I mean, first of all, this is just, fascinating. I could sit here and listen to you guys for 2 hours. I feel like I'm getting a free therapy session, and so are all of our listeners. It's fascinating. So just a couple of thoughts, and then a nice little segue into my next question is, like, I just personally in my own faith journey, like, I get so excited when I see scientific research validate God's design. And you mentioned attachment theory that's been around for 80 years. It's like the overnight success that wasn't overnight at all. Just because people are learning about it recently doesn't mean that it hasn't been around for a long time. And Mark, you said, I wrote this down in my notes, you can't be spiritually mature without being emotionally secure. And I'm going to remember that, number one. And number two, I feel like every church on the planet that is truly a church, we want to help people get spiritually mature. But to do that, we need to be emotionally secure. And Amy, you just mentioned strong families are the foundation of everything, our society. And not that, like, single parents and divorce, you've mentioned it, like, we're not saying it's not possible there. We're just talking about, like, strong families are really, really important. And so here's my question with How We Love. How does How We Love, and you two specifically, like, how are you helping churches with all of this that you are, all of that you're doing with attachment theory and How We Love? Tell our listeners, because we got a lot of church leaders, pastors that listen. Tell us how you're helping churches, and then I want to segue into your book, Mark, and then some of the strategies you guys are using.
Yeah, so howwelove.com it birthed from the book How We Love that Marilyn and Kay wrote in 2006. And so they'd been speaking on this for decades now and teaching, and people told them, oh, we should write a book. And so then they wrote that book in 2006. And then they continued talking. And then as things have evolved, the internet, digital resources, a great way just to connect with people all over the world. And so How We Love, really, our mission is to really educate people about attachment and the healing process. And so we have a free quiz on there, attachment style quiz, that 5,000 to 7,000 people, depending on the month, take that quiz each month. And so that will tell you your attachment style. And then we talk about, we give information on attachment styles and core.
You said 5,000 to 7,000?
5,000 to 7,000 per month. It's astounding.
That's a quality lead generator right there. That's quality.
It's amazing because people connect with this. We do these workshops, and people will hear, and people say, "Well, I've been married for 30 years. You just described everything that's going on. Like, how have I not heard about this?" And so that's what we want to do. We want to teach people. We want to put it out there. And so we have resources. And again, like I said, it's, I can't earn her attachment. She can't earn mine. So we have resources for individuals. We have resources for couples. We have resources for parents. We have attachment core pattern therapy. So we have resources for therapists to teach them the type of therapy that Mylon and Kay designed. And then we also have resources for churches. We have a church group study. It's a 9-week group study, and it's video teaching. So we do the teaching. There are physical books that come along with that. And so we do the teaching through the videos, but then there's typically a table facilitator who just kind of guides the discussion. But everything is there in the book. But we have we have churches in Australia doing this. We have churches in Europe doing this. We have churches in Asia who are doing this. And if we didn't have the internet, right, we never would be able to reach all of those people. Right, it would be down to what Mylon and Kay were doing, going from church to church to church. Back in the early days, several decades ago.
That's amazing. Do you guys do any traveling or speaking or consulting with churches?
Yeah, when we get invited to churches, we go and we do the How We Love workshop. It's a 6-hour workshop that we do. We also have How We Love Our Kids. So we talk about the attachment styles in parenting and in children, and how do you build and help your child through that healing process if you are learning it, just now yourself as a parent. And then we also have a third workshop called How We Love Our Sex, or Don't.
Because that's a good title.
Yeah, because that really is a major barrier for people. But because we don't know, again, all science is observation. It's observation of the natural, and the natural is God's design. So we don't have to be scared of science. We're just observing what God's design is. So that's why science is constantly proving what the Bible's already told us. But we don't understand one another's design. We're designed in completely different ways when it comes to sexual arousal. And when men expect that women should behave and engage in the way that they get aroused, relationships get stuck. And so we want to teach people, again, how do you connect with one another? Because sex really is a byproduct of relational, emotional intimacy. It's not the other way around. Sex doesn't produce emotional intimacy. Emotional intimacy really produces sex. Good, fulfilling, healthy sex in a marriage.
Yeah, a whole nother podcast on that. But a 6-hour workshop looks like usually a Friday night, 2 hours, where we kind of introduce, where you start with attachment. And then the Saturday is 4 hours, a lot about, the individual attachment imprints, the growth goals, like how to grow out. And the other thing that's really beautiful that is done in the church setting is a comfort circle, a live demonstration. So we will ask people, tell us what bugs you about your spouse on the break. Pretty bold question. And if you're practicing the comfort circle at home, disclosure, don't choose the dirtiest dish in the sink to practice at home. Work up to it, but they come with what bugs you the most about your spouse. And that it turns into a listener speaker role. We say, it's 45 minutes of free therapy. And they're walked through the comfort circle. And then you can see in that comfort circle where a lot of what is bugging them is from that past. And then they're able to see and empathize with their spouse about where that comes from. And it's such a relief to the other person to know hey, 80% of this isn't even me. You know what I mean?
Well, that really is the golden moment, because we're teaching about attachment style.
It's so powerful. And there's free comfort circle video on our website too, if you check it out.
The comfort circle really is the demonstration of what that then looks like. And so that's really kind of the most powerful thing that we do toward the end of the workshop is again, we just get a volunteer couple and they come up on stage and we don't know anything about them, and we walk them through this, and people see that it's achievable, that we can do this in our relationship.
That's amazing. So for all the church leaders and pastors listening, we'll have all the links for resources for churches, the free video on the comfort circle, Amy, that you just mentioned. We'll make sure show notes, descriptions on all of this. So church leaders and pastors, all of that will be available there. And then, so what I want to do now is I want to transition, because again, I could listen to you guys for a couple of hours, but got some more questions that I want to ask you guys. So Mark, by the time this podcast releases, your book will have, if all the schedules line up, your book will have literally very recently released. And so my first question is, what's your book, and why did you feel like God was calling you? You were compelled to write a book now. So what's it about? And how'd you come through the process of saying, I need to do this?
So this is my book.
That's so exciting.
Just got to put it up there.
Amy's anxious to show.
Just making sure he was going to do that.
Yep. Let's go to Understand Your Attachment Style, released on December 2nd. So just released. And so, the difference between this and How We Love is focused more on the couple's dynamic.
Okay.
And really learning how to do the comfort circle, whereas my book really is focused more on the individual growth. How do you do that growth? The interesting thing, Mariners is probably the biggest church that run our study. And so this last session, they had 150 people who joined the study. Well, interestingly enough, there was only 17 couples in that.
Oh, wow.
About 80 women who came by themselves, and the rest were men. I think if I'm doing the math right, something around 30 men or something like that. Well, the majority of men were not in a relationship, not married. The majority of women were married. So they were coming, they were showing up, because their spouse wasn't interested in growing. And so when we do, if you just do a marriage workshop at a church, you're going to miss out on all of those folks who really are struggling in their marriage. You're going to get most of the people who are like, oh, we just marriage improvers and we want to come and we want to deepen. And that's great. And that's what this stuff is for. But it's also really for the people who are struggling. And so my book is really on that individual journey. How do you earn your secure attachment style? I mean, there's only so much that you can put in a book, right? If your book's this big, no one's going to pick it up,
right?
and read it. Seems like too much work, right? And so it's not that Myron and Kay missed this stuff. It's just they wanted to focus more on the core pattern. And so I've come and I've really talked about the individual growth work. And where that birthed from is, as Amy said, I read this, but no two individuals grow exactly the same rate. And you don't have the same starting spot. And so this came from my own experiences of what I needed to do to learn and grow. It also came with helping people in therapy, people who came as a couple, but people also came individually to work on their marriage, but their spouse didn't come. And so it really was the process from A to Z of how I walk someone through. Now, attachment's rated on a continuum, so we can be mildly, moderately, or very much this way. And secure attachment is the same way. I mean, all secure attachment means is that you act more securely more often than you do insecurely. But if you're 51% of the way some way, you've still got a long way to go. So we can continually grow. So that's why I mirror this with the sanctification process. We continually grow. We continually improve. The more insight we get, the more awareness we get, the more able we are to practice as we learn to overcome our triggers and become aware of our triggers. So that's really what this is for. And so it's really designed also as almost like a manual too, that you keep going back to and you keep, because we don't remember everything that we've read. So that you can go back to and you can keep on working.
It's so cool. I'm so excited for you that that your book is out and that you're putting it out in the world. Like I told you, like I really hope that it's going to sell a lot of copies, but you have at least one in me. I will be an early reader of that. So I'm curious. You have with How We Love, with your book. Want to transition to a couple of just digital media questions, because I'm just really compelled by the work you're doing. It's so important. Like, I'm married with 4 kids and I love my wife, and marriage is really hard and raising kids is hard and life is busy. And yet I think I've learned more about God through marriage than maybe anything else. And so I just love what you guys are doing, and your book is amazing. And I should say, your book is built on an amazing concept, because I haven't read it yet, but I will. What's the book launch process been like? Like, how are you leveraging digital media strategies so as many people as possible can hear about this thing that you produced?
Yeah, well, though, as we mentioned, the one thing about digital media is you can reach all the corners of the globe here of
corners
internet, and so. Yeah, I mean, really a lot of the promotion, I don't have to do, because we can do video like this, like we're at home and you're in Missouri, I believe, or Kansas. And
yep.
So we're totally, we're miles away from one another, but we can do this and people can hear about it. And so we've flown places and we've done podcasts. We just came back from Focus on the Family last weekend. We did the podcast there with them. But I've also done several podcasts this way, where I've been able to, connect with different audiences through different podcasts and be able to share, this amazing research that is transformational for people and can be transformational for people if you put this into practice. I mean, we're also utilizing, full disclosure here, you work for Amplify, and that's how we met, because we use Amplify media to amplify our voice. You guys do our social media for us. You guys create such amazing posts and videos, reels from our clips. I'm also on a national radio show that actually reaches internationally too. Because you can listen online with this show called New Life Live. And so that was started over 30 years ago. Original people there were Stephen Arterburn, Henry Cloud, and John Townsend. They were the original boys club who did it. And it's a call-in radio show. People call in with a problem, and there's two clinicians who are on the show. It airs daily, and we answer their questions. So we try and get about 5 or 6 people's questions answered during that show. But that's another way that people can hear about me, and another great way that people who are struggling can get free advice. And really, you're helping more than just the person who's calling in, because the person who calls in, there's thousands of people with that same or similar problem, and so you're helping them all at the same time. It just takes that one brave person to call in and share their story and be vulnerable that way. And so yeah, digital media, now it's not just available over the airwaves. You can access that live on YouTube or live on Facebook. And so, yeah, it's just a fantastic way to reach a whole bunch of people.
That's awesome. Is your radio show, does it turn into a podcast? Because obviously you're live, but then can people go find it like in kind of an asynchronous podcast format?
Yes, they can find it. New Life has their own app, New Life Ministries. It's also available in all the podcast media places that broadcast. So yeah, it's available on YouTube, and so yeah, the episodes are recorded and they're placed so that people can go back and they can watch the old episodes.
Well, not that you guys need more work, but I mean, I'd be fascinated if you guys had your own podcast where you two just talked about all this stuff. So maybe that could be, maybe that's something in the future, because I know you're busy and everything, but I just want to share that personally, because I just think this conversation's been awesome. It's making me think, and I would listen to you guys weekly if you're just having a conversation about what this looks like for marriages and families. So
well, thank you.
Take that for what it's, take that for what it's worth.
Yeah. Well, this ministry, How We Love, and now this book has kind of been like the child that we've never had. And we know people that work in ministry. It is like ministry creates a need, it's like sometimes who's putting the baby to bed, who's waking up with the baby, it takes a lot of time and energy out of relationships. So, I'm feeling that, stepping into this new role, but I feel so honored that Mylan and Kay prayed and actually chose us to take on How We Love. Mylan was a pastor, turned pastoral counselor, and Kay, after she had 4 children and a lot of life experience, became a counselor. And out of those two dynamics, How We Love was birthed. And, with our background of, me having the sciencey, nursey brain, and him having the therapy business brain, we'll see what God has in store for us.
Well, that's really exciting. I'm curious. I want to go back real quick to the quiz that's on your website that's generating 5,000 to 7,000 responses, because, any digital media strategy, we need to generate leads. And so there's a bunch of different options for lead generators, free PDFs, free guides, all this kind of stuff. But you guys have a quiz that is bringing 5,000 to 7,000 people into your ecosystem with their emails and their contact information. How did that quiz come about? How did you figure out that was a good idea? Tell us, because for all of us that want to get our message out there, lead generators are part of a good digital media strategy. I'm just super curious how this all happened and went from nothing to 5,000 to 7,000 leads a month.
Well, people love quizzes, and people love to be put into a box, but people love to understand and identify what's going on. And so that's what attachment is. Attachment, this is not about, I want to reiterate, this is not about blaming parents. This is about explaining what has happened to us. And it's not about putting someone into a box. Usually people who kind of have that pushback, they have a core of shame in that. It's not about putting people in the box. It's about creating categories of understanding. If you go to the doctor and the doctor says, well, I don't know what's wrong, that's a problem. But when a doctor says, well, I know exactly what's wrong, because with a diagnosis comes a prescription, comes a cure. when we know that. And so this is really about helping people understand. So that's, I believe, where Mylan and Kay created this. That quiz
Cool.
was around long before we met them. I don't know how much longer before, but they came up with these questions to help people understand, a starting spot of where they're at. Because if you can understand, if somebody is an avoider or someone's a vacillator, okay, well, now you know what your core pattern is. Your core pattern is avoider vacillator. And then let us show you, what that, how that core pattern plays out in conflict and in expectation. So that's where it came from. And then a couple of years ago, they had a researcher who reached out to them and said, hey, I love your material and I use it. And I'd love to help you guys really get this statistically validated so that it really does on a statistical scientific level prove what it proves. And so we're really at the tail end of that process here. And so we've actually put thousands of dollars into that. And so this actually now proves what it proves, your attachment style. And so I mean, we haven't really advertised that too much. I'm sure when we do, that probably gives us a little bit more credibility. But when people understand about attachment styles, and it starts to make sense, the light bulb go on, but then people want to know what is my attachment style? And the quiz is just kind of this great introduction of questions to help people identify what that is.
That's amazing. So I think, I just have one more question for both of you, because just to reiterate, I appreciate what you guys are doing, and it's super exciting to see. Obviously, I'm biased and I like Amplify, and we exist to help amplify missions and messages that matter. It's a really special thing that we get to do, and we're grateful to partner with you guys and help as many people as possible discover and engage with what you're doing. So I just appreciate you two and appreciate what you're doing. And my question is just simply, is there anything that we haven't covered yet that you would share with our audience as we're wrapping up the episode?
Well, I think we covered a lot. I mean, there's so much to cover with attachment. Like as you said, we have 3 workshops that we do because, and we have multiple webinars and audios on there because there's so many things that it impacts. I think the good news that I want people to leave here with attachment is that we can identify what's gone wrong, and we can work towards secure attachment. And for those people who are listening, I'm sure most people are Christians who are listening, like this is part of the sanctification process. And so there's good news here. You don't have to keep struggling doing what you're doing and trying to figure out, well, what's the next best thing to do? And why am I not getting the results? Research shows us that there is a way that we can heal. And I'm just so glad to be able to be another attachment book out there. But hopefully to be able to present it in a specific way too, that people can really see the whole process of how to heal.
Yeah, as we've been doing the How We Love groups at the end of, the Mariners group, it's like, okay, like what's next and what's something for individuals? And that's what this book was really birthed out of, because How We Love is more geared for couples. But the How We Love material in the church setting is really powerful, because you can't necessarily engage in this comfort circle without 2 people. And stand alone, a lot of times you think, oh, I'm fine, but when you engage with another person, that's when conflict, differences, and things can arise. And that's where you can really do the work of earning your secure attachment. So we have 2 churches in Pennsylvania, and they use How We Love curriculum to train their volunteers on how to deal with, the things that come up that, come to the front, like as far as, does this marriage need a counselor, or is there a resource? So the How We Love material is really, it can be used in a lot of ways in the church setting. So I think if a church is wanting to, check it out, there is, the videos for the small church study is Mylan and Kay. It's like 20 minutes once a week, along with the participant guide and the church guide. And that's 9 weeks. Like we're actually doing that in our small group on Thursday nights, as the new thing that we're doing. So that is a cool way. There's also the 6-hour workshop on How We Love, if you want to kind of see everything. Also, what we did with Focus on the Family in March with Mylan and Kay kind of tells the individual story, because Mylan is a recovering pleaser, Kay is a recovering avoider. And what does their marriage pattern look like versus the vacillator. And that's kind of the interesting thing. If you can understand, have that PhD in your spouse's childhood history, it creates a whole lot of empathy to be able to go further in this work. So there's so many different ways to.
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate you guys sharing all of that. And I just appreciate, like I said, I appreciate your work. I appreciate the free hour-long therapy session we got here with a little bit of digital ministry and just understanding what you're doing to get the word out about how we love, about understanding your attachment style, everything to all of our listeners, everything that we talked about today, all the different digital resources will be linked both to How We Love and to the book, so you guys can see what strategies they're using, what social media looks like, what the website looks like, how the quiz operates as a lead generator, even the book website with the pop-up saying, "Hey, give me a free chapter for your email." Like, you got me, I'm in. There's just a lot of things that I think pastors and church leaders that we can learn from, how you're doing really important work with people that are in the same room with you, and you're also leveraging social and digital media to share the message that you're called to share as widely and as broadly as possible, to help people understand that in the sense that there's a sense where we're all broken, and also, like, we don't have to feel guilty about that because we don't have the words to articulate what's going on. We can actually learn about ourselves, learn about our spouses, our significant others, whoever it may be, and we can grow closer together. So I just appreciate you two so much. Thanks for coming on to the show. And yeah, I think we'll leave it there. So check out the show notes, check out all the links, and buy the book when you hear this episode. So that's it for this episode of Social Media Church. Thanks for being here, and we will see you next week.